Hey, my name is Emma. I'm 36 years old, and for the last 10 years, I've worked as a nurse in a small local hospital just outside the city. I've always been passionate about helping others, and nursing felt like a natural fit for me. The long hours, the constant need for attention and care, it was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. It made me feel like I was doing something important, even if only for a moment at a time. That was before everything changed. That was before Ryan died. Ryan, my husband, my best friend. We had been married for 5 years. It wasn't long, but it felt like a lifetime of shared moments. We met in college, both of us attending the same university. He was studying engineering, and I was working toward my nursing degree. We clicked from the moment we met. There was something easy about our connection, something natural. We married a year after graduating, eager to start our lives together. Life was good. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything was ripped away from me. Ryan died in a car accident. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's fault, but it didn't matter. He was gone. 1 minute, he was here with me, laughing, planning our future, and the next, he was taken away. The world became a duller place without him. My whole existence felt like it had lost its color dot at first. I tried to keep going, to keep functioning, like everything was normal. I threw myself into my work, hoping the distraction would numb the pain. It worked for a while, or at least it seemed to. But the nights were always the hardest. I would lay in our bed, where Ryan's side was still untouched, and I would feel the weight of the silence. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. They all expected me to move on, to pick up the pieces, but it wasn't that simple. How could I move on when every part of me was still tethered to him? It had been almost a year since Ryan passed when the hospital hired Michael, the new physiotherapist. At first, I didn't pay much attention. It was just another change, another new face. In the halls, that there was something about him, something I couldn't place. He was taller than Ryan, maybe, but it was his eyes that made me pause. I couldn't help but notice them. They were dark brown, warm, deep, and so familiar. They reminded me so much of Ryan's eyes. I remember the first time I saw him clearly. I was in the break room, sitting at the small table by the window, sipping on a cup of coffee. It was late in the afternoon, and the hospital was quieter than usual. My shift had been long, and the exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders. I wasn't looking for anything more than a moment of peace, but life had other plans. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and then the door to the break room opened. I looked up, half expecting one of my colleagues to walk in, but instead, it was a man I hadn't seen before. He was standing just inside the door, looking uncertain, his hand resting on the handle, like he wasn't quite sure whether he should enter. "Hey, I'm sorry," he said, his voice a little sheepish. "I was just looking for the physiotherapy department. I'm new here." I took a moment to look at him, taking in his tall frame, his dark hair, and the way he carried himself with an easy confidence. But what struck me most were his eyes, exactly like Ryan's. I couldn't look away. I felt an inexplicable pang in my chest, something deep and raw, as if I was staring into the face of someone I had lost. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice coming out more trembly than I had intended. He smiled, a warm, easy smile that had an immediate effect on me. "Yeah, I'm Michael. I just started as the new physiotherapist. I'm trying to get myself oriented around the hospital. This place is huge." The more he talked, the more it felt like my mind was playing tricks on me. Michael's voice, his presence, everything about him felt familiar, yet completely foreign. I had to remind myself that I was talking to a stranger. Someone new, not someone I knew intimately. Emma, I said, standing up to shake his hand, my own suddenly feeling clammy. I'm a nurse here. I've been here for a while, so if you need anything, just let me know. Nice to meet you, Michael replied, and as we shook hands, I couldn't help but notice the way his hand felt in mine, warm and strong, but it also felt like he was holding on to something more than just politeness. We exchanged a few more words about the hospital, the departments and the usual pleasantries. But through it all, my mind kept going back to those eyes. They were Ryan's eyes. They were haunting me. As Michael left the break room, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just the familiarity of his eyes. It was something deeper, something that made my heart race and my stomach churn. I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts aside. He was just a stranger, after all. It was nothing more than a coincidence. But as the days went on, I kept running into him. It wasn't intentional, but every time I saw Michael, I couldn't help but feel like there was some invisible thread connecting us. We would have short, casual conversations in the hallway or over lunch. Each time I felt a strange pull and attraction that I couldn't explain. And it wasn't just his looks. It was something in the way he listened to me, something in the way he made me feel seen. One day, I found myself waiting for a coffee in the hospital cafeteria when I noticed Michael standing at the counter looking at the menu. I was surprised to find that my heart fluttered at the sight of him. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to feel anything for anyone again, especially not someone who reminded me so much of Ryan. I hesitated, then walked up to him. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. How's your first week going? Busy, he replied with a smile. But good. I've met a lot of great people here. We talked for a little longer, but as the conversation ended and I turned to leave, I caught him looking at me a little too intently. The same intensity I'd seen the first time we met. It was then that I realized I couldn't ignore the way he made me feel. Michael wasn't just some guy. He was someone who felt important, who felt like he could fill a space in my heart that I hadn't even known was empty. And as much as I tried to dismiss the thought, there was something else I couldn't shake. His eyes. They weren't just similar to Ryan's. They were almost identical. The warmth, the depth, they were the same. I left the cafeteria with a knot in my stomach. This wasn't supposed to be happening. But here I was, torn between the memory of my husband and a man who looked too much like him to be a coincidence. That night, I went home and sat on the couch, staring out the window. The world outside was dark, quiet. And yet, all I could hear was the voice in my head, repeating the same question over and over again. Why did Michael remind me so much of Ryan? And more importantly, was it possible that the universe was offering me a second chance at something I wasn't ready for? As I stared into the night, I realized one thing. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. The question was no longer whether I should move on. The question was whether I was ready to face what was happening with Michael, and the truth about how deeply Ryan's memory still lived within me. The days following that first encounter with Michael felt strange. I couldn't help but think of him constantly, even when I was at work, surrounded by patients and co-workers. His face, his smile, and most hauntingly, his eyes, those deep brown eyes, kept floating in my mind like a ghost of my past. Every time I saw him in the halls, my heart skipped a beat, and it was becoming harder and harder to ignore the strange pull between us. Wasn't that I wanted to forget Ryan? I would never forget him. He was my husband, my soulmate, the love of my life. But every time Michael's gaze met mine, I couldn't help but feel like I was being drawn into something I wasn't ready for. He wasn't just a new colleague. There was something more, something familiar about him, especially in the way he looked at me with such an intensity that it made my heart ache with a longing I hadn't felt in over a year. It was a Friday afternoon, when I found myself in the break room again, nursing a cup of coffee, hoping to calm the racing thoughts in my mind. The hospital had been busy, and I was exhausted from my shift, but something told me I needed a break. The room was quiet, with only a few nurses lingering around, chatting softly. I wasn't really paying attention to the conversations around me when I heard the door creak open. Without even turning around, I could feel the familiar presence of Michael. "Hey," he greeted, his voice warm but uncertain. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up, surprised to see him standing there, holding a cup of coffee. For a moment I was speechless. His face seemed familiar in a way that was almost painful, and those eyes were looking at me with a question I didn't know how to answer. "Of course. Have a seat," I said, my voice steady though. I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. Michael took a seat across from me, and we sat in silence for a moment, both of us sipping our coffee. The quiet between us felt comfortable, but there was also an undeniable tension, something unspoken that hung in the air. "I'm glad we're getting to know each other better," Michael said after a while, breaking the silence. His voice had a way of soothing me, even as it made my heart flutter. "I feel like we've had a lot of brief encounters, but not really any real conversations." I nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, it's been busy around here, but I'm glad you're settling in okay. How's the work going? Are you getting the hang of things?" Michael shrugged slightly, but there was a hint of something more in his smile. "It's going well, but there's something about this place that's different. The people here, they're kind. They make you feel like you belong." I like that. His words struck me in a way I wasn't expecting. I'd always felt like an outsider of sorts, even though I had been a nurse here for years. The hospital was a place where I went through the motions, helping others, keeping my emotions buried. But Michael, in his brief time here, had already found something I had never quite realized. I was missing a sense of connection, a feeling of belonging. We spent the next few minutes talking about work, about the hospital, and about some of the patients we had seen that day. The conversation was casual, but there was an ease to it that I hadn't expected. Michael wasn't just some new guy I had to get to know. He was someone who made me feel like I could talk about anything, someone who didn't need to fill the silence with meaningless chatter. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't done in a long time. "Tell me about your life before you came here," I asked, surprising myself with the personal question. But once the words left my mouth, I realized I genuinely wanted to know. I wanted to know more about Michael, about who he was and what brought him to this hospital. I wanted to understand why I felt such an inexplicable connection to him. Michael seemed taken aback by the question, but after a moment he began to speak, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I was living in Chicago for a while before this," he began, his eyes softening as he talked. "I worked at a few different clinics, mostly helping athletes recover from injuries. But when I heard about this position here, I felt like it was the right time for a change. Something about this place felt familiar, like it was calling. Emmy." He paused for a moment, his gaze shifting as if he was lost in thought. "And I guess I was looking for something. Maybe something more than just the work. I don't know. But then I walked into the hospital, and it felt like I was meant to be here, like I was supposed to find this place. And find you." His words hit me unexpectedly, and I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. "Find me?" I hadn't expected him to say anything like that. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My heart was racing, and I couldn't keep my mind from spinning. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a quieter, more intimate tone. "I don't know how to explain it," he said slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "But from the moment I saw you, I felt this pull. Something about you. It felt familiar. I don't know if it's the way you carry yourself, or the kindness in your eyes, but I just felt drawn to you. And I couldn't ignore it. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell him that he was crazy, that I was still mourning Ryan, that this feeling, this strange connection was just my mind playing tricks on me. But another part of me couldn't deny it. There was something about Michael that was different. Something that made me feel alive again. Something that reminded me of Ryan but also felt completely new. Before I could respond, the door to the break room opened again, and a few of the other nurses walked in, interrupting the moment. Michael smiled softly, standing up as he did. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said quickly, his eyes softening. "I just wanted to be honest with you. But it's okay. We don't need to talk about this right now." I stood up as well, unsure of what to say. It's fine, Michael. I'm just think about it," he said, his smile gentle but sincere. "I'll be here if you need to talk. You don't have to make any decisions right now." I watched him leave the break room, feeling a rush of emotions that I couldn't sort through. What had just happened? Why did I feel this strange connection to him, as if he was a part of my life that I didn't know I was missing? Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Michael's words lingered in my mind, and I realized that there was more to this than just simple attraction. It was something deeper, something I didn't understand. For the first time in a long time, I felt confused, torn between the memory of Ryan and the pull of something new. I knew one thing for certain, though. I couldn't ignore Michael, or what he had said. And I had no idea what this would mean for me, for my heart, or for my future. The following weeks felt like a blur. I went through the motions of my days, checking in on patients, answering phone calls, administering medications, each task mechanically performed, while my thoughts constantly drifted back to Michael. He was everywhere. In the hallways, in the break room, in my thoughts. And every time our eyes met, I felt a strange combination of comfort and confusion. The pull between us was undeniable, but so was the reality of what I had lost in Ryan. Tried to keep my distance from Michael, afraid of what it might mean for me to get too close to him. It wasn't fair. To him, to Ryan, and most of all, to myself. Yet, every time I saw Michael's eyes, those familiar, warm eyes that seemed to hold a world of emotions, I couldn't ignore the stirring inside me. It was like Ryan had come back to me in a form I hadn't expected, and yet there was something undeniably different about him too. One rainy afternoon, I was sitting in my car, parked outside the hospital, when my phone buzzed with a message from Michael. My heart skipped as I opened it. "I hope you don't mind me texting you. I've been thinking about what we talked about the other day. I don't want to pressure you, but I feel like there's something we need to talk about. Can we meet after work?" I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Should I meet him? Was it a mistake to even consider it? I had been trying to avoid this connection for so long, but now, here I was, being pulled in once again. I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him, and the truth was, I needed to understand what was happening between us. I quickly typed a reply. "Okay, let's meet." The cafe was quiet, the dim lighting casting a soft glow over the small table where we sat. Michael had already arrived by the time I got there, and he looked up as I walked in, his eyes immediately meeting mine with that same intensity I'd come to recognize. There was a quiet calm about him, but also an underlying tension, as if we were both on the precipice of something that would change everything. I sat down across from him, my hands nervously folding in my lap. He gave me a gentle smile, but I could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," Michael said, his voice soft. "I know this isn't easy, and I didn't want to push you, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we needed to talk. I think we both know there's something between us, something real, but I don't want to make things harder for you. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't supposed to be happening. I wasn't supposed to feel this way about someone else, not after losing Ryan. But sitting here, in front of Michael, I couldn't deny it anymore. There was something real here, something I couldn't ignore. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I've spent so long holding on to Ryan's memory, so long grieving for him, that I don't know how to open my heart to anyone else. I don't want to dishonor his memory, Michael. He was my life, my everything." "I get that," Michael replied, his voice gentle but filled with understanding. "And I don't want to replace him. I never could. I'm not trying to take his place. But I've never felt like this about anyone before. Not like this. And I don't want to just walk away from it, from us." His words hit me like a wave. I had been avoiding the truth for so long, telling myself that it was too soon, that I wasn't ready. But Michael's sincerity, the way he spoke with such honesty, made it impossible to deny what I had been feeling all along. "I'm scared," I admitted, my eyes welling with tears. "Scared that if I open my heart again, I'll lose everything. Scared that I'll forget Ryan. Scared that this connection with you will only make me feel more alone." Michael reached across the table, his hand gently covering mine. His touch was warm, comforting, and somehow familiar, like the hands of someone who had been a part of my life for much longer than just a few weeks. "You're not alone," he said softly. "You don't have to forget Ryan. He will always be a part of you. But that doesn't mean there's no room for something new, something different. You deserve happiness, Emma. You deserve to feel alive again." For a moment, the world around us seemed to disappear. I looked into Michael's eyes and I saw it a depth, a connection. It wasn't the same as what I had with Ryan, but it was real. And I realized maybe it was okay to let myself feel this, to let myself explore what was happening between us. "I don't know what this is, or where it will go," I said, my voice shaky but filled with hope. "But I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to take the risk." Michael's smile was slow, but it was the kind of smile that made my heart swell. "That's all I'm asking, to take a chance." And in that moment, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that it was time to stop living in the shadow of the past and start living in the present. A few weeks later, things between Michael and I began to unfold in ways I hadn't expected. We spent more time together, dinner dates, quiet walks, and long conversations that stretched into the night. Every time I was with him, I felt more like myself, more alive than I had in over a year. It wasn't about replacing Ryan. It was about moving forward, about allowing myself to love again, even if it looked different than I had imagined. One afternoon, Michael took me to the park, a quiet, peaceful place just outside of town. As we sat on a bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Emma, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "I never meant for you to feel confused or pressured. I've told you a lot about myself, but there's something I need to say about why I came here, why I was drawn to you." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it?" Michael took a deep breath. "I knew Ryan, We weren't close, but we worked together a few years ago on a project. When I found out about the accident, it hit me hard. I didn't know how to deal with it, but I couldn't forget him. And when I saw you here, I saw the same strength in your eyes, the same warmth in your smile that Ryan had. I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting to find myself so drawn to you. But here we are. I sat there, stunned, as the weight of his words sank in. Michael wasn't just someone who looked like Ryan. He had known him. He had been part of my husband's life in some way. And that connection, that thread, was what had brought him into my life now. I don't know what this means, I said softly, my voice trembling with the realization of how much this had all shifted. But I'm glad it's you. I'm glad you're here. And in that moment, as the stars began to twinkle above us, I knew that while Ryan would always be a part of me, I was ready to begin a new chapter. With Michael, I was no longer just living in the past. I was learning to love again, to take chances, and to embrace the future. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. We didn't know what the future would hold, but together, we were ready to find out.